Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Coffee with Conrad. This is episode 4, and today we're going to be talking about Power BI for IT and some stuff that Conrad and the team have been working on over the last couple of weeks. How you doing this morning, Conrad?
Doing good.
All
How are you
right,
doing?
doing all right. I cannot wait to get back to the office, but shelter in place, we're doing it.
What are you talking about? This is the office, except
We've got the modern workplace down, but it's a lot more fun when I can see everybody.
well, that's true. Maybe next time I'll turn the cam on and we'll do it that way. But yeah, no, really excited to talk about this topic. It's something that really has been on my mind for quite some time. I'd say, man, over maybe a year. This was something that we were kind of exploring and thinking about and just you know, kind of on this journey, if you will, around Power BI. And we've most of the times, like if you go to Power BI .microsoft.com, the cool thing is you can go there, download the desktop version for free, and really like it's fantastic. It really is. It's really good for really anybody to go dive into it. The part that makes it kind of hard though is that what I found is if you're in the numbers game, you're an accountant, you're in marketing, sales, you get lots of numbers. Man, Power BI it speaks to you. It really kind of in any kind of analytics background or data. But the challenge is, I think a lot of times for IT, we don't normally think about our data as numbers, right? So you look at Power BI and like, what does this mean? So that's the first challenge. Second challenge is a lot of times we're dealing with data that isn't always consistent and directly retrievable, right? And I'll talk about that in a little bit. So, but you have all these systems, and we've been collecting log files for years in IT. Like, oh, I have log files. Okay, what would you do? Well, I'll pump it into Excel, and I create a pivot table. Like, I mean, if I do it that way, but it's a very kind of one-to-one activity. So again, one is there's all this kind of data out there. There's so much, and just like in many times in IT, where sometimes we don't spend as much time maybe doing automation or spend too much time, of creating kind of repeatable processes because we feel like we're under the gun, we can't do it. My mindset is always very, very different, right? If I have to do these things over and over and over again, I can't afford to not do it. But you have to find the time. Anyway, so you have all this data, that's out here, and and a lot of times these questions that you want to ask, and by you could be the business or your users, or management, IT, or the CFO. They have a lot of these kind of questions about what they want to look at, and it's kind of hard to figure that out with all these data types. Now, Microsoft has done just a really fantastic job of providing some kind of like built-in, dashboards so you can do things. And those dashboards are, actually really good, at what they're doing, but it normally solves a very generic question, right? Like, what's your total usage overall? And it's a great thing to look at because from a usage perspective, you want to know like what's my whole organization, but sometimes you want to know how is the usage for these people on these days. You might find out, well, what's the scenario is like that because sometimes it was for training, and you wanted to see have those people gotten better at it. Are they using it more? And I want to ask very specific questions, and maybe I want to tie that usage to also some other piece of data. And I'll actually show like just a little view of this, so you'll actually see a Power BI dashboard. I won't go into the deepness of it because that's what we have tech talks for, where we can go deep and have fun there. But anyway, so you want to be able to explore all those things. But the other problem is that in order to really get good at this, you also have to know Power BI. And one of the things that I've found is that, in not just for IT people, but we've done these Power BI sessions for a number of other customers. And one of the struggles is if you teach them, because there's a lot of other, not to throw shade to all these other people, but the problem is that if you do just like a one-day generic Power BI class where all these people come together and there's like this beautifully sanitized data that you work with. The challenge is that people don't connect with it, so they don't really see the benefit. They don't kind of gravitate to it because it's not really them. right? So they kind of move away from it. So the really cool thing is when we do this, so like Azure Log Analytics, fantastic. Like connecting to that thing, getting cool data out of it. You can export it. You can do a query, whatever you want in Log Analytics, and then you can export that query directly into Power BI and do all kinds of cool stuff with it. I'll actually show that in a second. So that's the first thing. Then you have Azure Graph. Now Azure Graph is one of the most fantastic things out there for anybody who loves automation. I am one of those people. I'm a total junkie for it. And you know, but there's some slight problems because it's not really a problem, but you kind of get why it's like this. But in order to connect to Azure Graph, you can't just like, oh, here's this API and boom, I'm going to go to it because it uses this OAuth connection. And you understand why it has these, like you have to create a registered app and an enterprise application in Azure Active Directory because you need to define the API, you have to define the consent, who has what. So you got to do kind of a lot of wiring up. And I get why they do that, and it's actually really, really smart because you don't want to just open this thing up to everybody anywhere. Like it's super dangerous, though. So that's why you have to wire it up. But in order to connect to it, we actually had to create this Power BI connector, custom connector that allowed it to work in this fashion. But once that was wired up, like, wow, it's amazing because you can just put in the REST API to it, and now you can pull that data in. And then the third part is really data from local systems. Now, this one's a little bit tricky. We have our own called the Agile IT Automation Library. It's a collection of PowerShell scripts and modules that all work together. And we have this one that does a discovery, and it will like deeply interrogate Azure Active Directory, but also local Active Directory, Exchange, your file. We're adding things in there for the file system so we can get this data out. It's not so much that you can't write a script to do it, but we do it in a very standard way every single time. So then you can make it very easy when you put it into Power BI, which is really where you really want to start dealing with it and making some movement. So here's the thing: if you're going to invest, if you're in Office 365 or you're going to go to Office 365, and you're going to work with, you have access to all that information either in your logs or in your graph or whatever else it is. Once you kind of go into that environment, there's so much access to it, but it does take time. So that's something that we have a thing, Power BI for IT, so we can actually help you wire these things up, help you configure it, and then kind of walk you through it. Because when you're doing, Power BI, for the first time, it can be a bit daunting, right? There can be, quite a bit of configuration here. I'll show this in a second. Quite a bit of configuration that you need to go do, and it gets tough. But once you kind of get, you start to get into the pattern of working with it and seeing how to connect data, how to relate data with one another and merge data together, it really is a fun tool. So that's kind of where we're headed with that. Just give me a second, and I'll show you one of the things that we did here that might be pretty interesting, I think. Hold on here while I dance around. Give me a second, guys. Sorry. All right. Here we go. So this is a Power BI. I'll show you here. This is again a Power BI the desktop, and what you're going to see here is data that is pulled from Azure Active Directory. I'm sorry. Okay. First, let me talk about the scenario. Scenario is you have a bunch of hourly workers in the state of California, and they can only work during certain times. That's what you're paid to, and you have to ensure and validate for the state that you have people who are not working at other times that they're not supposed to. So how do you figure that out? Well, every time people log into Azure Active Directory, we actually stream all that information directly into Log Analytics. So that way we can store long-term and do lots of interesting queries. So that's where all this data comes from. So here we have a list of users, and this isn't their real working times, but let's see, these are their working times. The day, the time they're allowed to start, and the time they're supposed to end. This comes out of a spreadsheet. But then we compare that to the data that comes out of Log Analytics that tells us when they actually logged on during these days, right? So this is kind of a sampling of that data. And so now I can see the people that I have, there's if they did log into those valid times, then it's a good login. If they did not, if they logged in any other time on those days outside those times, then it's not such a good login. So the cool thing here is that you can see which people, what their shifts were, and then you can see, how many of those logins did they have, and you can click on the person. You can say, all right, well, who did it on Thursdays? So I can see, Thursdays, here's kind of the breakdown here, and then I can even drill in a little bit more on the person and get even more specific on the information. And I can even see where they're coming in from, right? So this is doing it through, through Exchange Advocate Sync. I can see this person is doing it because I selected them. So I'm able to get this. So this is just one example. This is something we're gonna, make available to other people to check it out. But again, all this data comes from log analytics. We're able to get the Excel spreadsheet because normally this is a question like, hey, how do I figure this out, IT people? And it's like, I don't know, man. Like I gotta go get all these things and send it to you, email it. Like, no, we create a dashboard, publish it into Teams or into SharePoint or in Power BI just online, and then people can go get to it. They can then from there they can get subscriptions and email it to themselves once a week. I don't care. So that's just a small thing that's there. So as you can tell, I'm always super excited about this because the ability to access these systems, not just individually, right, but to pull together disparate systems in that same thing instead of a spreadsheet that could have been going against the HR system, because it can talk to SQL, it's got other APIs, and I can start to blend and merge that information. And as an IT person, dashboards and reports, it isn't just for, are my servers up and running? I don't have any servers. They're all in on Microsoft 365. But even if I did, it's normally what we normally think of. We think about charts for monitoring or patches, whatever. And there's still that you can do. A ton of it you can get from log analytics, but there's more interesting types of data you can get that is really in the hands of IT people, but you can put it in a really interesting dashboard or report and expose that to the business to do business things. So this is where I feel like IT people can become more, business leaders and exposing information because they have all of it together. But you got to know how to connect to it. You got to learn the tool. And third, you have to start listening for those challenges that the business is having. And now we don't have to think like, oh, here it is, this hard thing, and I got to go scrape data. Like, no, it's all right there. So anyway, that's kind of what we kind of think about for Power BI for IT people. Like I said, I think it's a really great resource. There's tons of data out there to go do it. I think it solves a lot of these problems for for the business or for IT people on a kind of ongoing basis. So anyway, that was kind of my topic for today.
Great. Thank you, Conrad. Let's see if there's any questions in the panel here. Doesn't look like there's any questions. I've seen this a few times. How long did it take you to get the Graph API tied in with Power BI?
It probably took a little over 20 hours just to do that. I mean, because there was it wasn't so obvious and easy. Like just kind of banging my head like, why is this just not working? I should be able to do this. And it's like, oh, then there's an article that talks about it, and I thought there would be built-in container. There's some other stuff on GitHub, but once we kind of got it working, it really just opened the door. I can put a URL in and say, hey, I want to connect to all the users in Azure AD. Boom, you get everything. And it's real time, right? So I'm able to directly query that and get the data. So it's really, it's really made a kind of open my eyes to, the kind of details that we can get from things.
Yeah, and prior to this, I mean, I was aware of the Graph API as it sits into security, and was unaware of all of the other signals. And I mean, this has been a big topic this week: signals, signals, signals. But yeah, once you put this together, it was really eye-opening for me to see all of that information.
Yeah, if you want Power BI, there's actually a connector for the Azure Security Graph, but that won't give you like the list of all your users. And then, hey, if I had the list of all the users, I want to know what are all their email addresses or other identities that have the graph has all this like really great information. And unless you're if you can PowerShell it and go and run a bunch of commands, but that gets kind of tough too. Then what normally ends up happening, right? Like, well, I can write PowerShell to go get that. Well, what happens? Like, well, that means if you have to run that PowerShell all the time, right? So instead of writing that PowerShell all the time, which is no knock, like I love it, but instead you just call the same API and it goes right into Power BI, and now that data is just sitting in there, and that's where I can do interesting things. And I get it, people all the time like, well, I can PowerShell it and clean it, massages. Yeah, but then what do you do with it? Well, then I email it to somebody. It means you have a person there all the time. What about just create a dashboard and they go to it whenever they want? So that's what I like.
So got a good question here. What licenses besides Power BI do we need to do this?
So to show you kind of the things that I did right there, so the Power BI desktop is free. So you can download it, you can use it and connect to it and do whatever you want. Now, obviously, whatever you're connecting to, so if you're getting stuff in log analytics, they kind of charge you based off the amount of data you put into it, how long you store the data. If you have Azure Graph, again, it just depends on what resources you have in there. Obviously, if I got a bunch of VMs, I'm paying for that anyway, so it doesn't cost me anything more to go get that data from the graph. So nothing you have to pay there. Where you need the Power BI Pro license is if I got that dashboard that I made right there and hit the publish button and put it into Teams someplace or just in Power BI, all the people who are going to connect to it need the Power BI license to be able to see it or interact with it. So that part of it for those people. So, but just to say, hey, as a IT person, to get the desktop app and start to connect to the systems, nothing.
Great, thank you. All right, and that wraps up the questions. They're in the questions queue for now. Give it a second to see what else comes up. Conrad, thank you very much for sharing this. This has been a great 2 weeks so far. We'll be continuing on as long as we're working from home, maybe longer if there's a positive enough reception. For those of you watching online, you can see all of our past episodes by going to agilit.co/CWC, or you can even join and be right here in our, I guess, live, not studio audience. And join us and ask your own questions. You feel free also to ask questions in the comments section down below. We'll be happy to answer those for you. And thanks for joining us, and we will see you next week. Thanks, Conrad.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.